Hi, I'm Carole Owens, and this is Stockbridge Updates. It has been such gorgeous weather. Aren't we lucky in the most marvelous fall? And along with a good fall, I have all kinds of fun information for you. Now, mark your calendars. On November 9th, there's a grand opening at Norman Rockwell Museum of an exhibit of sisters. It's all about remarkable women, one of my favorite subjects. And you know, that kind of leads into my editorial. And I was thinking, we used to tell American history by going from fabulous man to fabulous man and from war to war, as if the women did nothing and nothing happened in peacetime. But since we've wised up, we have Indigenous People Day instead of Columbus Day. We have Black History Month. I'm not sure what we're doing for the women, but we are telling their stories. And remember, November 9th at Norman Rockwell. But I was hoping that we wouldn't make another mistake. If we told white history without the blacks, let's not now tell black history without the whites. Let's not tell the history of the settlers without the Indians, or the history of the Indians without the settlers. We all made America what it is. We should all take a bow. These are the stories of us. Let's include everybody. Now, on October 18th, a perfectly beautiful day, there was a ceremony at in Lee, Massachusetts, at what they call the gazebo, and they made October 18th by proclamation Housatonic River Day. I think it's wonderful. It connects the Housatonic River cleanup that we're all trying to live with now with the the Clean Water Act, which was passed in the 1940s, right after World War II. It was meant to protect our waterways, and I think it's great to connect it to that. And I think it's wonderful that Lee wants us all to be aware that it is by law our right to have clean water, including our Housatonic. And last, what fun, on October 24th, Charlie Flint and his daughter Sydney, both of Lenox, went treasure hunting with their metal detector and their paraphernalia. And Sydney told me she's been doing it since they were 9 years old. I said she was 9 years old, and every time they find something. And this time, believe it or not, they found a cast iron axe head that was signed. And the person who signed it was Jeremiah Stewart, and he was a resident of Stockbridge until 1856. He was a blacksmith and a tool maker, and he had a shop on Main Street. And he went from Main Street to the Stockbridge Cemetery, but Charlie and Sydney found his axe head. Now, to stick with the how exciting and what fun theme, I have the best guest. Dr. Kevin Mitz, an orthopedic surgeon here in the Berkshires, is with me. Good morning.
Good morning, Carol.
Hi. And I know I'm just going to do a little introduction, because even though you're an orthopedic surgeon, you are an enthusiastic and knowledgeable person about climate.
Yes.
And I want to connect the two. When we had the big storm that hit North Carolina so badly, it wiped out a company in its warehouse called Baxter.
Yes.
Now tell me all about it, and tell me how that makes it, if we have what seems to be an isolated climate event in Florida, North Carolina, Arizona, it affects us too.
Certainly did, and it continues to affect us here in the Berkshires. Hurricane, I think it was Helene,
I do, yes.
It washed out Asheville, North Carolina, and in so doing washed out the Baxter plant. Baxter supplies IV fluid and irrigation fluid that hospitals use nationwide. 60% of all the fluid supplied in U.S. hospitals is made at Baxter at that plant. And it went completely offline, continues to be largely offline until this week. The latest is this week. But that climate event, right, because that storm is ramped up very quickly and became a very powerful storm. It reached far inland and washed out that plant, which affects our health care here. We presently are rationing fluids in the hospital. Now, people are getting good health care in the hospital, but we're cutting back on elective procedures so that we can take care of the people who need the fluids the most. Dialysis patients, critical care patients, trauma patients, and chemotherapy patients. And so while we're beginning to just be able to ramp back up, it's been quite an effort on the part of the healthcare system to keep things going.
So we should not, if I understand you now, none of us should be thinking, oh gosh, there are impacts of global warming 1,000 miles away, but it's not impacting us, because by golly, it is.
Climate change struck the Berkshires last month with that hurricane. There is no doubt about it.
Wow. So when Helene struck Asheville, North Carolina, it also struck us.
It affects all three of our hospitals and our patients.
You know, I have another quick example that I know very little about, so I'll just give you the headline. Helene also affected Montpelier, Vermont. We, Patrick White, our select board member, and Denny Alsop, who is a very, like you, a very well-educated climate expert. We're all going up there today to see the damage, because that storm just ripped right through and Montpelier was flooded. And you're telling me that happens a lot.
It does happen a lot, and especially, Vermont. Such a hilly state. A lot of rivers and streams go through these towns, and these towns get cut off, seems like almost every year now. But all summer long with big thunderstorms, they were devastated this past summer and in years past. And so it's something that is even happening here with roads and bridges getting washed out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
This is such good information.
Yeah.
And another, maybe you can tell me more about this. This is all I know. That in Montpelier, going back to what you said, that especially Vermont, every summer on the same day in July, they have a flood in Vermont.
Yes. Well, I do know that they're especially challenged with these storms that come up from that come up the East Coast, that they, for some reason, seem to get an undue burden of water and flooding in their towns. And that's really been going on for several years, even since Sandy. Vermont got devastated with Sandy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So interesting. I want to switch a little bit, though, because you're a prominent physician in our community. And I think you touch a lot of bases, and you know so many of your colleagues. How would you identify the good news, bad news about providing health services in the Berkshires today?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that the problems in healthcare in the Berkshires really have to do with the problems of the social determinants of healthcare, right? So housing, food, employment, and transportation, right? If people have those things, they have better healthcare and better access to healthcare than people who don't have those things. And that especially is true in our rural parts of this county, where people can't have access to health care, they can't get where they need to go, or if they're unemployed, they can't find a primary care doctor to take care of them. So those are the drivers, I think. But the unique problems that we have here in the Berkshires are difficulty recruiting and retaining doctors.
Yes.
Especially primary care doctors. My group, we have 18 providers. We have 9 doctors and 9 PAs. And so we're lucky. We're fully staffed. But we see patients that they can see an orthopedic surgeon, but they can't find a primary care doctor.
They can find the specialist.
Yes.
They can't find general medicine.
That's right.
Yes, that's true. And I'm wondering, where the age factor comes in, because let me just share with you that the average age in the state of the median age in the state of Massachusetts is 49, and in Stockbridge it's 62.
Right. Yeah. So definitely. And I do think that there's a little bit of a generational problem here in the Berkshires with access to health care, because as we age, we use a disproportionate share of healthcare resources, which is normal, right?
Right, yeah.
And I think that primary care doctors, we have difficulty recruiting them, and the ones that are here, their panels are full, and they're overwhelmed. And frequently it just takes a lot of begging and pleading, for even doctor to doctor to get somebody in to see a primary care doctor. The recruiting issue really is, doctors come here, they usually will stay if they have a connection, a family connection, or if they grew up here, or if their spouse is from close by. Mary Beth is from West Hartford, so that's why we were attracted to this area.
That's Mary Beth Mitz, and she is running against Lee Davis in the November 5th election to be your representative in the Berkshire 3rd District.
Yes. So she's from the area. That's what brought us here. That was our hook. And if there's no hook, they're not going to come, because it seems very rural to people. And then they get here and they love it, but you have to get them here,
Are they looking at the stats? Like there are fewer people and they live further apart and it's harder then to have a full practice? Or
I think reimbursements are probably lower here than they are in other areas, especially for primary care doctors and specialists. It's all regionalized, but the cost of living is also lower than it is in Boston and New York City, right? I mean, it is. I wonder
if they realize that.
Right, and so a lot of it's a sell. You have to sell. You have to show them all the great things about the Berkshires, take them around and show them all the beautiful areas and the great restaurants and wine and dine, and hopefully they come.
Is somebody taking the lead in that? I mean, is that up to the medical community or the political community?
It's really up to the medical community. There's an HR department at the hospital, and they do our broad recruiting for us on a national basis and for all practices. And then the practices then will take the lead. Once they get a resume from a doctor, they'll contact them, bring them in, and try to recruit them to the area. But that primary care doctors is one thing. We also have a shortage, of nurse practitioners and PAs. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't want to see nurse practitioners and PAs. We really encourage our patients to see our PAs, and so that's an issue. There's a shortage of certified of medical assistants and of CNAs in our nursing facilities and in our hospitals, certified nursing assistants. And so we have this across-the-board shortage of healthcare personnel in the Berkshires that make it especially challenging and make the system kind of fragile,
I have to tell you a very funny story. It also reaches out to dentistry. I was at a dinner party on Saturday night, and I believe there were 8 of us at the table, and I can't even remember what made me say it, but out loud, someone asked me. The person sitting next to me asked, and I answered in a normal tone, I have an excellent dentist. Mm-hmm. And 7 other people said, give me his name.
Exactly, I know.
No, because there's a shortage with dentists.
There is, and they're aging out. They're retiring. A lot of them are retiring, like a lot of primary care doctors.
2 of my dentists aged out. I'm on my 3rd.
Luckily, my dentist is the same age as me, so hopefully he'll be around for a while.
Right. No, I've wised up. I now have a dentist that is 40 years younger than I am.
That's smart. It's very smart.
No, it's very important.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think. Now, another thing that I connect to what you're talking about, and I'm sure you know something about it, is the problem we have with EMTs.
Oh, it's a huge problem for us, and that impacts my practice, but I think it impacts almost all doctors' practices. Shortage of EMT services in Berkshire County writ large, but also especially in the rural areas. In my practice, we may have a patient in North Adams or at Fairview who needs to be transported to Berkshire Medical Center. Uh-huh. We will frequently wait hours or even a day for that patient to be transferred and get their definitive care. And then when that patient's being transferred, that ambulance is then off service for somebody who might need it in another part of the county. I recently was speaking to a couple of folks down in Sandusfield. They're way down there in a corner. They have a veterans home there. And when a veteran falls, the ambulance comes and they have to take him to Fairview Hospital. That ambulance is offline and that far away for 3 hours or more.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
And then they're uncovered. So there's cross coverage that goes on. But definitely there's a problem with EMS services that affects, emergency services, trauma services, and, transportation.
And that's one of the things I'm concerned about. I have been told, I have no firsthand information, but that it's life and death. How many minutes between alerting that we need help,
right,
and getting to that patient,
yes,
with the EMT, and that there's different levels of training, so that there may be even fewer people that know what to do if it's a stroke or a heart attack.
Right. If you have a heart attack and you're in the line between New Marlboro and Sandusfield, they're not going to be at your house for a while. You're probably not going to be at the hospital in more than an hour, right?
Gosh.
Yes, it's kind of frightening. And it makes you, I've met a lot of older EMTs who are retired or prior EMTs. There some friends of mine, Tom Andrews is one, Robin McGraw is one, the Burroughs family down in Sandusfield. And imagine how hard it was for them back in the day, when the transportation and the technology was much worse than it is today.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so these are brave people who work really hard and are really dedicated to what they do.
Oh, they're wonderful. We had an event on Stockbridge Bowl where someone was drowning, by gosh, and they got that ambulance with the EMTs, and there are special ones trained for water rescue or
right,
water intervention.
Right.
And they made like a human line. I get emotional about this.
It must have been intense.
And they saved this person. It was just wonderful.
Oh, boy. That sounds horrifying to see.
Now, you have, even though you're a surgeon, I understand you have special experience and information in ER.
Well, I do because I'm an orthopedic surgeon, and so we're in the ER a lot. Is that where you're going? Certainly
think so.
We are in the ER, and so I know most of the emergency room doctors, and we have rapport with them and communicate with them. I think that one thing I will say that I've seen over the years, and we came here in 2001, is that what we've seen is that the healthcare system is kind of fragile, and that includes our ER system. You see what happened up in North Adams. We're just reestablishing, we've reestablished emergency services, reestablishing inpatient services. But an event like Baxter, an event like COVID, with the shutdowns that we had, these have huge financial impacts on the hospital and a trickle-down effect on the community, the people who work, the number one employer in Berkshire County. And so the fragility can't be forgotten.
Berkshire Medical Center is the number one employer
In Berkshire County.
That's good to know.
Yes, yeah, because, they own all three hospitals. Berkshire Healthcare does. And so, the healthcare is the number one employer here, as it is in many places. Yeah.
When you first said fragile, I thought of the fragility, maybe because of my profession. I didn't think of financial fragility. I thought of the fragility of individuals. And I watched nurses whom I knew during COVID. It was so hard.
Right, very hard. Very scary time. I had a nurse who came in to see me, and she had slipped and injured herself, but the circumstances were that she and her husband were both nurses, and, early on it was quite frightening. And they were exposed to COVID patients in the ICU, and they would come home and they would strip down and wash themselves off in the garage so that they didn't contaminate their families.
Right.
And it was walking up the stairs out of the garage with nothing on that she slipped and fell and hurt herself, So, and these people were very afraid that they were going to either get sick themselves or make their families sick. The stress levels were incredibly high,
And in my field, psychology, I worked at NIH intermittently, working with doctors about death and dying. It's doctors and nurses, that's very hard. They're there to save the patient.
Right. We have, in my particular specialty, we have a robust geriatric fracture program. So there are a lot of elderly patients in the county, and they're falling and breaking a lot of things. And so we have a co-management program with the hospitalists, the internal medicine doctors.
Oh, very
and
good.
we co-manage the patients as they come in. But end-of-life discussions, you can imagine, are pretty common.
They are, and they're very,
and so
very
important.
hard.
And
Yeah.
they are hard, but I think that people want to have them. And I think that healthcare providers sometimes can be reluctant to broach them.
That's right. And my training was for the providers, whether doctors or nurses, encouraging them that this is so important, not just to the patient, but to the family,
Right.
to the loved ones of the patient.
They're looking for guidance.
They want to do the right
Right.
thing.
Right.
You know.
And so I have those conversations routinely, and I think all doctors should.
I bet you're good at it.
I think I am.
Yeah, yeah. No, you.
I have a lot of practice.
You have a good way about you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I think, folks, in that our population is more sparse and it is aging, medical services and emergency medical services are so important in our area. And Stockbridge Updates will pay special attention to get you good reporting about what we're doing. But for the moment, if all the doctors are like Dr. Mitz, I think we're in very good hands. So thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Carole.